My name is Nadia Okonkwo. I'm 31 years old, and I've spent the last 8 years building something most people in my family never thought I was capable of. Not because I lacked the ability, because they never bothered to look. On the morning of March 4th, I walked into the Hargrove County Courthouse wearing a gray blazer I'd pressed the night before, carrying a leather portfolio that had seen better days. I wasn't there as a defense attorney. I wasn't there as a prosecutor. I was there as a paralegal, assigned to courtroom 6, supporting a senior partner who hadn't learned my last name in 4 months. That was fine. That was the plan. What wasn't in the plan was seeing my uncle standing at the plaintiff's table on the other side of the aisle, shuffling papers, adjusting his cufflinks, looking every inch the decorated civil litigator he'd always told everyone he was. He glanced up once. His eyes passed over me the way they always had, like I was furniture, like I was someone else's problem. He turned back to his papers. I sat down, opened my portfolio, and began to work. Let me tell you what he didn't know. He didn't know that 3 years earlier I had passed the bar on my first attempt. He didn't know that I had clerked for the Honorable Beatrice Stamos in the Ninth Circuit, or that she had written me a letter of recommendation she called the finest she'd ever composed. He didn't know about the pro bono clinic I ran out of a church basement in East Hargrove every other Saturday, or the 47 cases I had won there quietly, without a single press mention. He didn't know any of it because he had never asked. What he knew was what my grandmother had told him years ago, what he had chosen to believe and repeat at every family gathering since, that I was scattered, that I was too sensitive, that I had my mother's impracticality and none of my grandfather's discipline. He said it with the confidence of a man who had decided something once and saw no reason to revisit it. My grandfather had been a founding partner at Okonkwo and Reeves, one of the oldest black-owned law firms in the state. When he died, the firm passed to my uncle, not to my mother, who had practiced there for 11 years, not to me, who had grown up sitting in my grandfather's office reading his case files like other children read picture books, to my uncle, because he was the one who had stayed, who had pressed suits and attended dinners and smiled in the right photographs. I had gone a different direction. I had left for law school across the country, come back quietly, taken a paralegal position at a mid-sized firm 3 blocks from the courthouse, and started over without asking anyone's permission. Nobody at Hargrove County knew who I was. That was by design. There was one person who knew the full picture. Her name was Rosalind Tate, senior partner at Whitmore & Associates, the firm technically employing me that morning. She had known my grandfather. She had watched what happened after he died, and when I came to her 2 years ago and laid out what I wanted to do, she had looked at me across her desk for a long moment before saying, simply, "This is going to take patience." "I know," I told her. She handed me a box of business cards that said Paralegal Nadia O, and told me to keep my head down until the right moment. That morning in courtroom 6, the case on the docket was a wrongful termination suit. My uncle's client was a pharmaceutical company called Hartwell Dynamics, accused of firing a black research scientist named Dr. Yvonne Chu after she flagged internal data irregularities. The plaintiff, Dr. Chu, was represented by a solo practitioner named Garrett Fields, who had been practicing family law until 8 months ago and was clearly in over his head. I had watched the pre-trial filings come through Rosalind's office for weeks. I knew every exhibit. I had read every deposition twice. I was not supposed to be doing any of that. My actual assignment was tracking billing hours and formatting discovery documents. But I had learned a long time ago that the most dangerous person in any room is the one everyone has already decided doesn't matter. My uncle opened his arguments with the kind of smooth confidence that comes from decades of being listened to. He wore it the way he wore his suits, like he'd been born in it. He told the jury that Dr. Chu had been terminated not due to her findings, but due to a documented pattern of workplace conduct violations. He spoke slowly, deliberately, with the particular authority of a man accustomed to rooms falling quiet when he talked. Garrett Fields objected twice. Both times he fumbled the legal basis. I sat behind Rosalind's junior associate and wrote nothing visible. Inside the portfolio on a yellow legal pad, I was filling pages. By the lunch recess, I had 3 pages of notes. Something was wrong with my uncle's exhibit chain. Specifically, Exhibit 14, a performance review dated 11 months before Dr. Chu's termination, had been cited twice with inconsistent timestamps. The first citation matched the discovery disclosure. The second didn't. The second timestamp placed the review's creation date 4 days after Dr. Chu had filed her internal complaint. That meant the document had been altered or fabricated entirely. I didn't say anything during the recess. I ate a sandwich at my desk, triple-checked my notes, and sent a brief message to Rosalind. She responded in 4 minutes. Confirmed. Come up at 4. I was in her office at 4 o'clock exactly. She read my notes without speaking. When she finished, she set the legal pad on her desk and looked at me the way she sometimes did, like she was calculating something she'd already decided. You understand what you're asking me to do, she said. I'm asking you to do nothing, I told her. This is Garrett Fields' case to win or lose. All I'm asking is whether we have an ethical obligation to flag document fraud to the court. She was quiet for a moment. Then she said, even if we flag it anonymously, they'll trace it back here. I know, and you understand what that means for your position. I do. She picked up the legal pad again. I'll need 2 hours. What happened next moved faster than I expected. Rosalind reached out to a contact in the State Bar's disciplinary office, not to report, but to ask a very specific procedural question about mid-trial document fraud disclosure obligations. The answer came back clear. The obligation existed. The method was prescribed. By the following morning, a sealed communication had been delivered to the presiding judge, not from Whitmore and Associates, not from Garrett Fields, filed under the court's own ethics reporting protocol, unsigned but documented in the clerk's receiving log. The judge, the Honorable Raymond Park, called both counsel into chambers that afternoon. I wasn't in chambers. I was back at my desk, formatting discovery documents, doing exactly what I was paid to do. But Rosalind was in there. As an amicus contact named in the filing, what I learned afterward came in pieces, the way things do when you're not supposed to be listening, but the walls in old courthouses are thinner than anyone admits. My uncle had gone pale. Not metaphorically. One of the junior clerks described it to a paralegal colleague, 2 desks over from mine. She said the senior attorney for the defense had walked into chambers with the bearing of a man who had never lost anything, and had walked out looking like he'd swallowed something wrong. I kept typing. The trial was recessed for a forensic document review. Hartwell Dynamics placed my uncle's firm on administrative hold pending the outcome. The Philadelphia Inquirer picked up a small item about a mid-trial ethics filing in a wrongful termination case involving a pharmaceutical company. I read the article on my lunch break. My name was not in it. That was fine. What I hadn't counted on was my uncle figuring out where the filing originated. He was good at what he did. I'll give him that. By the end of the week, he had traced the amicus contact back to Whitmore and Associates, and from there, with one well-placed phone call to a mutual colleague, back to the paralegal on the billing records. To me. I was in the break room pouring coffee when he walked in. He looked the same as he always did, composed, tailored, completely certain of his authority in any space he occupied. He looked at my name badge, then at my face, and I watched something happen in his expression that I had never seen there before. Not anger, not embarrassment, something older, something that looked almost like he was recalculating a sum he thought he'd already solved. You filed it, he said. I picked up my coffee cup. I followed the court's prescribed ethics reporting protocol, I said. As is required, you're a paralegal. I'm many things. He stared at me for a moment. I had seen that look directed at opposing counsel in courtrooms, at junior associates who'd made errors, At my mother when she brought up the firm's succession after my grandfather's funeral. It was the look he gave things he intended to flatten. "I've spoken to Rosalind," he said. "I know what you've been doing here. Then you know it's been thorough." His jaw tightened. "You're going to derail everything. This case, my client relationship, 14 years of—" I set my cup down on the counter. 14 years of what, exactly? He didn't finish. I walked back to my desk. The document forensics came back 9 days later. Exhibit 14 had been created on a system registered to a Hartwell Dynamics HR administrator, time-stamped internally at a date that confirmed the alteration. The original performance review, recovered from a backup server, contained no conduct violations. It contained, instead, a notation that Dr. Chu's internal complaint had been escalated to senior leadership and marked for follow-up. The follow-up had never happened. What happened instead was a termination letter issued 11 days later. Hartwell Dynamics withdrew my uncle's firm from representation that Friday afternoon. My uncle did not come back to the courthouse, but something else happened that I didn't expect, and it started with the woman 2 rows behind me in the gallery. Her name was Juno Fitzgerald. She was a research coordinator at a nonprofit healthcare advocacy organization, and she had been attending the trial every day because Dr. Trinme, Chu was her former graduate school mentor. She had watched the whole thing. She had been there when the recess was called, when the murmur went through the gallery, when Garrett Field stood up straighter than he had in days. She found me in the courthouse lobby on the Thursday after the document review results came out. She said, "I know what you did." I said, "I don't know what you mean." She said, "Yes, you do, and I want to know why." I thought about it for a moment. Then I said, because the truth was sitting right there in that exhibit log. Someone just had to read far enough. She handed me her card. "My organization is looking for a legal advisor," she said, formally. "With your actual title and your actual name." I looked at the card for a long time. That evening I called Rosalind. She answered on the second ring. "How'd you like to formalize things?" she said before I could speak. She was smiling. I could hear it. I was quiet for a moment. I hadn't expected it to happen this way. I had expected something smaller, quieter, more gradual. The following Tuesday, I was sitting in Juno's office reviewing a grant-funded initiative on pharmaceutical accountability when my uncle called my cell phone for the first time in 6 years. I let it go to voicemail. He left a message that lasted 4 minutes and 11 seconds. I played it once, sitting in my car in the parking garage, staring at the concrete wall. He didn't apologize. That wasn't his language. What he said was something closer to acknowledgement, framed in the careful vocabulary of a man who was very good at giving away as little as possible. He said he had spoken to people who had worked with me. He said he had looked into my bar record. He said he had read the clerking letter from Judge Stamos, which Rosalind had apparently sent him, and which he described as formidable. He said he had underestimated me for a long time. Then he said that my grandfather had told him once, years before he died, that I was the one who understood what the firm was supposed to be for. My uncle said he hadn't known what that meant at the time. He said he thought he understood it now. I sat in the parking garage for a while after the message ended. I didn't call him back. Not that night. That week, Rosalind filed paperwork officially listing me as a supervising attorney at Whitmore & Associates. She sent me a bottle of sparkling cider with a note that said, "About time." Juno's organization brought me on as their first full-time legal counsel. My name, my real name, my full name, went on the door of an office for the first time. Nadia Okonkwo-esque. I stood there looking at it for longer than was probably reasonable. Dr. Chu won her case. Garrett Fields got a co-counsel assist from a Whitmore associate Rosalind quietly assigned in the final stretch. The jury came back in 4 hours. Hartwell Dynamics settled the following week for an amount that covered Dr. Chu's legal fees, lost wages, and a damages figure that made the local business section of the paper. She sent me a card. Handwritten, navy ink. 3 sentences. She said she didn't know my name until Juno told her. She said she was glad someone had been paying attention. She said thank you for reading far enough. I have the card in the back cover of my legal notebook, next to a photograph of my grandfather standing in front of the original Okonkwo and Reeves sign the day it was installed. He is not smiling in the photograph. He is looking directly at the camera with an expression I didn't understand when I was young. I understand it now. It isn't pride. It's certainty. The kind that doesn't need anyone's applause to hold its shape. My uncle and I spoke eventually. It was a brief conversation, careful on both sides, the way things are when two people are negotiating new terrain without a map. He did not ask me to come back to the firm. I didn't expect him to, and I wouldn't have said yes. But he did ask me something I hadn't been asked before, not by him. He asked what I was working on. I told him. The Pharmaceutical Accountability Initiative, a wrongful termination framework for internal whistleblowers, a pipeline program Juno and I were building with 2 local law schools to route students into public interest work before the debt pressure steered them somewhere else. He was quiet for a moment on the other end of the line. That's what he meant, my uncle said finally. I didn't ask who he meant. I knew. We said goodbye without ceremony. He called me Nadia, which sounds like nothing, but he had called me young lady for the better part of a decade, and it was not nothing. Some things shift slowly. You don't always get to see the exact moment. You just notice one day that the ground beneath you is different than it was. Juno's organization moved into a new space in October. 3 rooms, a conference table, a window that caught the afternoon light. On the first day, 2 law students from Temple showed up early and stood outside the door waiting. A third came in late and apologized. I told her being late once didn't define her, and she looked at me like I had said something strange. I understood that look. I had worn it once. The work is not dramatic. Most of it isn't. It's reading documents late at night and asking the question that nobody thought to ask. It's calling the number that's supposed to go nowhere and waiting to see if someone picks up. It's writing the brief that covers the angle everyone assumed was already covered. It's teaching other people how to do those things and then getting out of their way. I don't need a title on a door to do it, though I have one now. I don't need a firm with my grandfather's name on it, though I carry his name with me everywhere. I don't need my uncle's acknowledgement, though I have that now too, in his particular limited way. What I needed was to know that I had never stopped being the person my grandfather believed I was, that all those years of being looked through, talked over, underestimated at holiday dinners and courthouse hallways and family meetings about a firm I was never consulted on, none of that had taken anything from me. It hadn't. I want to say something to you before we close. If you have ever walked into a room and felt yourself become invisible, if you have ever had someone who should have believed in you look straight through you like you weren't worth the effort, if you have ever had your name left off a list you earned the right to be on, I want you to know something. That omission was never a verdict. It was a failure of their attention. The truth about you doesn't require their signature to be real. It doesn't need a ceremony or a formal acknowledgement or an apology offered in the exact language you deserved. Sometimes the acknowledgement comes quietly, in a 4-minute voicemail in a parking garage, and it doesn't fix everything, but it confirms what you already knew. You were right about yourself. The people who looked past you were wrong. Not maliciously, some of them, just wrong the way people are wrong when they stop asking questions about someone they think they already understand. And the most powerful thing you can do, the thing that cost them more than any confrontation ever could, is to keep becoming more of who you are. Don't shrink to fit the version of you they decided on. Don't waste your preparation on bitterness. Let it stay sharp. Let it stay clean. And then walk into the room where your work will speak for itself. And let it speak. I was dismissed as a paralegal in a courthouse where my family's name had meant something for 30 years. I sat 2 rows behind the people who made the decisions, and I read the documents they thought no one would read closely enough. And when the moment came, I didn't need to announce myself. The work did it for me. That's not a story about revenge. It's a story about patience, about knowing who you are long before anyone else in the room catches up, wherever you're watching from tonight. Whether it's a late shift or an early morning or one of those quiet afternoons when the world feels too small for everything you're carrying, I see you. You're not behind. You're not invisible. You're not the version of yourself that someone who stopped paying attention decided you were. You are the one who kept reading, the one who kept showing up, the one who stayed ready. That's the only credential that matters. Thank you for being here. We'll see you in the next one. I've thought a lot about cause and effect since all of this happened. Not in a grand philosophical way, just the practical kind. The kind where you trace a line backward and see exactly how each small choice made the next one possible. My uncle dismissed me because he stopped asking questions about me a long time ago. That wasn't cruelty exactly. It was something quieter and in some ways harder to argue with. It was certainty. He had decided what I was, filed it away, and moved on. People like that don't expect to be wrong because they rarely allow for the possibility, and when you are never wrong, you stop being careful. That's where I came in. I spent years building something in the space his certainty created. Every brief I wrote in that church basement, every late night I spent reading discovery documents that weren't technically my assignment. Every question I asked that nobody else thought to ask. None of it was dramatic. Most of it was lonely, but it was mine, and it was accumulating the way quiet things do, until the weight of it became undeniable. When I saw the timestamp inconsistency in Exhibit 14, I didn't feel victorious. I felt something closer to grief, actually, because it confirmed what I'd suspected, that the system protecting Dr. Chu's rights had a hole in it, and that hole had a name attached to it. A name I shared. But I didn't let that stop me. That's the part I want to sit with for a moment. Integrity isn't the absence of conflict. It's the decision you make when the conflict is personal, when the right thing to do costs you something. When you could look the other way and nobody would blame you because nobody even knows you're in the room. That was the moment for me. That break room, that folder, that call to Rosalind. I was not brave in any heroic sense. I was just unwilling to be the person who saw something and said nothing. My grandfather built a firm on the idea that the law existed to protect people who had fewer resources than the people coming after them. I grew up watching him work. I absorbed that without knowing I was absorbing it. And when the moment came, I didn't have to decide what kind of lawyer I wanted to be. I already knew. Juno once told me, after everything settled, that what struck her most wasn't what I had done, but how I had done it. No announcement, no confrontation, no performance, just the work placed exactly where it needed to be. She said it reminded her of something her grandmother used to say. The most powerful move is the one that requires no explanation. I think about that a lot. My uncle underestimated me because he confused invisibility with absence. He saw a paralegal badge and stopped looking. But I was never absent. I was preparing. And the thing about preparation is that it doesn't announce itself. It just becomes available when the moment asks for it. Dr. Combs. Chu deserved someone who would read far enough. Megan deserved someone who would write her name down. The students who show up at Juno's office deserve someone who will teach them to do the same thing for others. That's the chain. That's how it actually works. Not through confrontation, but through competence. Not through demanding to be seen, but through becoming impossible to overlook. I'm still learning that. I probably will be for a long time. But I know this much: no one can take credit for your preparation. No one can sign off on your ability to read a room, ask the right question, or stay steady when everything tells you to fold. That belongs to you. It always has. The only question is whether you trusted enough to let it do its work. I did, and here I am.